Welcome, everybody. So glad to have you joining us today. I am super excited to have Constanza Roeder here. And Constanza met Francis, who's not able to join us today, at the Top 100 Healthcare Leaders event. Constanza, you were part of the Top 100 Healthcare Leaders. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was quite an honor that was unexpected, but it was an awesome opportunity to get to meet people like Francis that are really making big changes in the world of healthcare.
Well, alongside you. And so, with that, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Ooh, yes. So I live in San Antonio, Texas, but I'm from California. So I'm a Cali girl at heart, but we've been here for a long time. And I am a musician, which maybe you don't have too many musicians that you interview on here, but
What kind of musician? What's your favorite?
I am a singer and I play a little bit of piano, like enough to kind of get by. But I'm also a leukemia survivor. I had leukemia when I was a teenager, and that, as you can imagine, that was definitely a life-shaping experience for me. And during that experience, I discovered the importance of the expressive arts in our lives and in our health, and the ways it can support our well-being, and which is now what I do. So I'm the founder and CEO of Hearts Need Art, creative support for patients and caregivers. We are a nonprofit here in San Antonio, and we identify and train local artists, musicians, and writers how to safely engage with adult patients in healthcare facilities, and virtually. We work virtually as well. So we go into hospitals. We primarily target people experiencing long hospital stays, so oncology, stroke and cardiac rehab, and we bring the arts to them in a very accessible and non-threatening way, because a lot of adults are like, "Oh, I'm not an artist," which we'll get to that later. And it's the most rewarding, amazing work. And it may seem like an oxymoron to have arts and healthcare, but it's when you see what it does, it's truly amazing. So kind of getting to that why I do this is well, I'll tell you a story. So there was this one day I was on the oncology unit, and I was playing music for patients, and a nurse came running to find me, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, can you please come to the BMT unit? We have an adult male patient who needs to take a shower, and he's kicked every one of his nurses out. He's refusing to shower. He's refusing to take his meds today. He's mad. He's upset, and he won't allow any of us in the room anymore."
He was not having it.
He was not having it. And she's like, "Maybe he'll let music in." And so I knocked, and he let me in, and we jammed out to some of his favorite music. And by the end of the session, he was laughing and just in a completely different mood. And so I went on my way and went on to the next rooms. And later on, that nurse came and found me, and she was like, "Thank you so much. We were able to go back in. He consented to take a shower. He's taking his meds now. Thank you." And music and the arts just have this power to shift internal states within us. So a lot of times when we're going through stressful situations, we put up armor, right? We have different coping mechanisms that we use to try to protect ourselves. And sometimes that can actually hinder care, those protective mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
But because people are afraid and they don't feel seen or heard, and they feel like they've lost control of their lives. And what the arts can do, and specifically what I see in music, is music can flow through the cracks in that armor and caress the person that's behind all of that, and really make them feel connected with and seen on a really deep level. And it's something that happens almost instantaneously. It's such a short, inexpensive intervention. And once that happens, the patient's worlds shift, and then they can sometimes make better decisions for themselves and their healthcare. Their mood improves, which helps reduce pain levels and anxiety levels and depressive symptoms, which can result in lower pain medication. And we know from literature, when we have a lower burden of psychosocial symptoms, you can have shorter hospital stays and lower rates of readmission from this like 5 to 10 minute intervention of just bringing music into a room. And what I sometimes when I get frustrated with them, um, our medical systems that are so like medication based and double blind controlled research trials, and all of those are so important, obviously. But you can have all the best medicine in the world, but if you're not attending to the person,
Mhm.
they may not be in a place where they're able to accept it. So
Yeah.
the arts
You
are able
really
to support that.
you really just hit the nail on the head, Constanza, the idea that, it's not either or, right?
Mhm.
It's both,
Yeah.
and I love the way you phrase the armor.
Mm.
That so we put up our armor, and I have personal experiences and stories that I can share about my parents that just match what you just
Yeah.
described. Having someone come in and just pay attention to who the person is, whatever it is, whether it's music or just having a conversation or, whatever the intervention is, fills those cracks that are
Mhm.
there. I love the way you said that. So powerful. And the interesting part is this intervention, as you said, is inexpensive, does
Mhm.
not take very long, and can
Mhm.
aid in all the other things that medicine and staff are trying to do. So we kind of were talking a little bit before the show about how this impacts the staff.
Ooh,
Let's
yes.
talk a little bit more about that because you illustrated that in the story. But staff has a tough time, not only with patients sometimes, but their own mental health, especially right now.
It's so it's so bad right now. A survey last year showed that I think it was like 85% of healthcare workers were reporting some level of burnout, and almost half had considered leaving the healthcare profession. It's a really tough time for healthcare providers right now. And there was a provider shortage before the pandemic,
Mhm.
and now it's even worse. But let me read a quote from one of our nurses that she shared once we were back in the hospital. So during COVID, there was 15 months when we couldn't work with patients in the hospital. So we worked with people virtually as much as we could. But when we were able to come back in, we were just flooded with the nursing staff, like, "Oh my gosh, we're so excited you're back!" And one of them said this. She said, "The arts give our patients something to do while they're in the hospital. Otherwise, they're bored and anxious, which causes more work for us. We love it when Hearts Need Art is here because our patients are happier, which eases the burden on the whole care team." So just providing those services to patients eases the burden of care for healthcare providers. But in addition, we do specifically target healthcare workers as well because there's research showing that the arts can help actually address some of the symptoms of burnout. So last year, when we again couldn't be in person, we tried several different things to try to engage staff. And the bottom line is there was no extra time. They had no margin to do self-care or do an hour of yoga, like all these other things that not just we were trying to provide them with, but that everyone was trying to support them with. So like, okay, what can we do that's short, punchy, impactful, that they can access anytime they have a second? So we created our Gratitude Grams program. And when healthcare providers enroll in our program, which if you're a healthcare provider watching, you can go to heartsneedart.org and click on Gratitude Grams. It's free to sign up. We match you with one of our artists, musicians, or writers, and you'll get regular emails, personalized emails that contain a message of thanks from someone in the community that wants to express thanks to healthcare providers, along with inspiring song or uplifting poem, or even little short art activity, a little doodle or something that you can do just to help shift your mood, to help Remember that you are seen and you are loved. We appreciate the sacrifice that you're making, and we're here with you in it, and we're here to cheer you on.
That's powerful.
It's the response has been really pretty amazing. The participants report feeling more hopeful, feeling more appreciated, feeling more energized, feeling feeling an improved mood. So just all of those things which connect with symptoms of burnout. So we're excited that the design of our program is hitting that target. But now that we're back in person, we're also taking music directly to nurses' stations in our partner hospitals. So we're just going through the different units. So we've been playing for nurses on COVID units and on med surge and all the different units, because everyone's burned out right now, not just on the COVID units.
So taking care of the staff who are taking care of the patients, you're also taking care of the patients directly. So indirectly and directly, you're taking care of the patients, and you're taking care of this amazing group of people. And we all know that it's the system that's broken, not the people in it. The people in it are just unbelievable. I'm blown away by the things that they do. And I think about the economic impact of what you're describing as the results of this. And I have zero doubt there are studies and there's dollar amounts out there, and you may know them. I don't know. I don't know them off the top of my head.
The last I looked, I think it costs healthcare systems about $83,000 to replace a nurse. So if programs like this can save even one nurse from leaving, it pays for the program, just one.
Yeah.
So we're working with hundreds of healthcare staff. So we're hoping in the future there can be more research done kind of specifically on these things. And there's some that are started. Right now it's a little chaotic to try to do formalized research. Anyway,
it is. And I'm sure there's probably plenty that we could pull from that already show the impact of arts on emotional well-being, mental well-being, job satisfaction, and at some level. You mentioned patients having shorter stays in the hospital. There's tangible economic impact there,
and HCAHPS scores as well. So for people that don't know, when you go to a hospital, you're randomly there's a third party that randomly sends out surveys that ask about your experience in the hospital, and patient satisfaction scores indicate, or they drive the amount of reimbursement that the hospital gets from Medicare and Medicaid. So there is financial incentive now to improve the patient experience, which is so great.
Yes.
Thank you, Affordable Care Act, that did that. And so there's now financial incentive on the hospitals, and there is data showing that arts interventions do improve healthcare patient satisfaction scores.
Yeah, and let's just be clear, there's the economic impact, and then there's the person-centered impact. Right. The person, the human being that we are all talking about here as we're talking about what the arts mean. And, I've seen it. Everyone in this industry has seen it, the impact of music on people, or, everyone is different. So different things impact people differently. But it's really interesting to watch the power of music shift somebody. And if you are in a healthcare system, you probably are going to deal with people who are in an agitated state to just sort of redirect their brain synopsis to something that is a little bit different, helps them get a little bit out of that anxiety state. And that's really powerful all the way around. You talked about reduced medications, all kinds of things. And I believe in all of this. So I'm a big proponent of what you're doing. So what do you do if you're not artistic at all? I draw stick people really, really well.
Perfect. So we get this a lot, and there's probably a lot of people listening that are like, oh, I'm not creative, or can't do art or can't sing, whatever the thing is. The thing is, we are born creators. Our first sounds are musical. Our first movements are dance-like. Our first mark making is artistic. We're imaginative and expressive naturally. It's only when someone tells us we can't that we don't. Whenever I ask people why do they think they're not an artist, they always have a story of wounding around their creativity and their expression, where someone said, "Oh, that's ugly," or "Oh, just mouth the words in the choir. We don't want to hear your voice. It's out of tune." Whatever that thing is. And what's sad for me as I'm also an arts educator, is we don't do this with any other subject. So we're not like, "Oh, you're a little bit slower to read, so you just aren't going to be a reader." Like, no, we like break it down to simpler levels to meet them where they're at and then build their skills from there. It's the same thing in the arts. So I'm a voice teacher. I've taught many people who have been told that they were tone deaf or couldn't sing how to sing. If you have inflection in your voice, in your speaking voice, you can learn how to sing. The rate of people who are truly tone deaf is actually very minuscule, and their speaking voices sound like this, and they're very monotone, and they kind of sound robotic, and they just have no inflection in their voices. So anyway, all that to say, you can start from wherever you are and enjoy the process of creative expression without having to focus on a particular product. We tend to be very productivity and just productivity oriented, and like, what's the purpose? And it's like, sometimes the process is the purpose. Sometimes the process is what is cathartic. You still exercise even though you're not a professional athlete, right? So because it's good for you. It's the same thing in the arts, and that the data is bearing that out. There's several studies that have been that show that one in particular showed that 45 minutes of art making helped to lower cortisol levels and improve other biomedical markers just after 45 minutes of art making. And there wasn't a difference between people who had lots of experience making art and people who had no experience making art. So the health benefits are pretty much the same. So you can start from wherever you are and you're good at it. And also, if we're talking about specifically about senior living and aging well and the role that the arts can play in aging, there's these really fascinating cohort studies that are coming out of the UK the last several years. If you don't know about those cohort studies, they essentially took a whole generation of babies that were born in a week, I think it was week's time, and they've been following them across their lifetime and gathering millions of data points on them, and they make those data points available to researchers. And they mine the data for all kinds of social determinants of health and like all those things. And they form their healthcare system around the results of these large cohort studies. And researchers have been starting to mine the data for connections between arts and cultural engagement and leisure activities and health and well-being. One of these studies in particular was looking at social determinants of health or mitigating factors for developing chronic pain later in life, which is a huge problem as we age. And one thing we hear a lot is exercise. You move it or lose it, right? So they were checking for the role of the exercise and different levels of exercise had in preventing chronic pain. But then they also were measuring the correlation between arts and cultural engagement and developing chronic pain. So what they found is that moderate to vigorous exercise every week does help reduce your chances of developing chronic pain later in life by 26%. Well, they also found that engaging in cultural and arts activities once a month reduced the risk of developing chronic pain later in life by 25%.
From what age? What age do you start doing that?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. I'd have to go back in the data to see at what point, like, and what's the cumulative impact? Like, can you start now and like when you're, already older? But there are connections to improved affect or mood and reduction in perceived pain levels, and just the social connections that happen in and around the arts are being super protective for our health. We know that isolation is incredibly damaging to our
Detrimental.
health.
Yes.
If you, all of you that are anxious and stressed out and depressed from this last year of isolation, you maybe have a little taste of this.
Yes.
A lot of older adults experience that all the time. So,
Yeah.
anyway, what they're finding is the way they implement this in their healthcare system now is they now have something called social prescribing. So across age groups, including older adults, when there's a large burden at the GP level, at the general practitioner level, where they had a lot of repeat offenders, they called them, for people that were coming in a lot for care over kind of things that were a little bit nebulous and could maybe be tracked to some lifestyle issues or loneliness or things like that. So what they do now is they connect those patients with a link worker that figures out what their interests are, and they help them connect with resources in their community. So join a choir or an art class, or they do sports leagues and stuff too, and their health system pays for that. So the health system is starting to pay for people to participate in arts and cultural engagement, and it's lowering the cost of care. It's lowering the cost of care across the board at the GP level in the UK, and they're starting to do some of this research in the United States to see what this could look like in the United States.
It's beautiful. And it's really interesting that we ramp up the arts and the music and this kind of engagement in the last years of our lives, but not so much until then. So very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Constanza, you are just amazing what you're doing. I love what you're doing. Congratulations on being a top 100 healthcare leader. Well deserved.
Thank
and
you.
I'm sure we will have you back on to talk further about this in depth. And if any of that research, if you can share that, we'll make sure it gets into the post for all of our listeners.
Sure.
Really. Yeah.
Yeah. And if people want to learn more about the role that the arts play in their health, we actually have a podcast now called Arts for the Health of It, which I think is a cheeky little name. And we talk to researchers, doctors, people who have used the arts to improve their health. And we try to incorporate some sort of accessible arts engagement that people can try, especially those people who are like, I'm not an artist. Like, you can listen and learn and then try some stuff. And you can find more about that at heartsneedart.org.
Okay, there we go. And we'll have all these links in the post so you can easily reach out. Constanza, is that the best way for them to reach you if somebody has a question for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a contact form on our website, and those requests go directly to me. You can also find us on social media at heartsneedart, all of the things. So feel free to check that out. Check our virtual resources out on our website. People can actually go on there and make appointments directly with our artists, musicians, and writers. If you're a patient, survivor, caregiver, those resources are available free of charge for you.
You're serving such a broad population. Really, really powerful what you're doing. Can't wait to see the research continue around this, because I'm a big believer in it as well. And I'm not musical and I'm not artistic.
That's okay.
I see the impact and I believe in it. So
yes, ma'am.
Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone listening, if you have any questions for Constanza, either reach out to her or post it on our page and we'll make sure that we get an answer for you. Thanks for joining us.